Campaign 2008, from the White House to the State House. Join us as the Illinois Channel connects you to the candidates, the conventions, and the issues that will determine America's future and the future of Illinois.
Next, our one-on-one interview with Dr. Steve Sauerberg, candidate for the Republican nomination for the U.S. Senate.
Dr. Steve Sauerberg, thanks for joining us on the Illinois Channel. You're a candidate for the Republican nomination for the U.S. Senate. Let's begin first with just telling us, why are you running for the U.S. Senate?
I'm running for the U.S. Senate because I think after 9/11, I began looking very closely at the quality of government we had in Washington and kind of looking very seriously, perhaps more intensively than I had in the earlier parts of my life, at government, and I didn't really like what I found. I didn't know that our government was doing the things that I thought we needed to be doing. I thought there were people in government that were of significant concern to me, and I certainly, in checking on my own United States senators, I thought Senator Durbin in particular was headed in the wrong direction on a lot of issues, and I began to study it very closely. I felt that he didn't represent the values of the taxpayers, the families, and the senior citizens of this state. And at that point, I thought, somebody's got to do something about this. And I didn't see anybody necessarily who was going to be any better at it than I was, even though I was your ordinary citizen doctor. I thought I had the ability to do this kind of thing, and I was very interested and very concerned. And the next thing you know, there I was, taking this very seriously and wanting to do the right thing for our nation and our state.
As we tape this, we just went past the 7th or 6th anniversary of 9/11, so it was somewhat of an evolutionary process, I guess. Were you political before 9/11, or if you were you a Republican in your own mind? Or
I was always a Republican, basically, although I've certainly voted both sides. But I was almost exclusively a Republican, I would have to admit. I think I was a good citizen prior to 9/11. I paid attention, I was interested, but nothing like I was after 9/11. 9/11 really changed things for me. I had a son who was very interested in politics. I think that impacted me. And all of a sudden I found myself deeply entrenched in political thinking and watching TV and starting to read and doing all the things that you do when you really get involved in something. And that really transformed my whole life.
As you began this process, was there, aside from the attacks on 9/11, was there a tipping point in the process that you finally came to the conclusion that you yourself ought to be a candidate?
Well, I think I'd seen Republican politics in Illinois struggle, and I didn't like to see that. I think it may have caused us to end up where we are today in kind of a mess in the state of Illinois, where we don't have a real strong bipartisan system at this time, and I didn't think that was good. And so I just continued to see this kind of gap in what I thought was competence in state and national, and it just kind of kept working on me. It just kept going.
You had mentioned that when you looked at what Senator Durbin was doing, you weren't particularly happy. What are some of the things that Senator Durbin was engaged in, or issues, stances that you took opposition to?
Well, I didn't think he was very supportive of our military. He said some things that were, I thought, pretty disturbing, deriding our troops. People want to believe that you can support the troops and not support their mission. I'm not sure that's true. And I also do think it counts what you say about the troops and what you say about the military. I think Senator Durbin comes up very short there. I'm a very strong supporter of the U.S. military, and that was certainly a major issue. And then he developed a voting record that turns out to be the most liberal in the United States Senate. And Illinois is not the most liberal state in the United States. So why would it have the most liberal representation in the United States? It just seems wrong to me. Why don't our representatives really represent our values? I didn't see it, and I thought it was wrong. And at a certain point, I didn't know what else to do that would work better than possibly running for office myself. And that's how I came to this point.
You described yourself as having already been a Republican philosophically. Where would you put yourself on the spectrum? Are you a conservative, a moderate, or just how would you describe your philosophy?
Moderately conservative. I don't think I'm a dramatic conservative. I don't think I'm way off on one end of the spectrum at all. But I do think that, certainly socially and in a lot of areas of life, I'm at least somewhat conservative. Yes, I am.
One of the big issues, obviously, is the war in Iraq. Where do you stand on that?
Well, at this point, I think we have to finish what we're doing. We have a very unstable and difficult situation in the Middle East. I think simply abandoning that situation is going to lead to chaos. I truly do believe that if we walk out of Iraq, that war will be taken to Afghanistan. If we leave Iraq, I suspect we'll leave Afghanistan. If we leave Afghanistan, that area of the world is going to become incredibly dangerous and just a mess, to be honest with you. And I don't think we can afford that. That is not in our national security's interest, I don't believe.
One of the things, in fact, just this week, there have been hearings in the U.S. Congress as we tape this in the beginning part of October of 2007 that on the war of terrorism. The question is, where do you draw the line between civil liberties and enhanced monitoring via listening to phone calls and all, as were some of the provisions passed under the Patriot Act? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I certainly support the Patriot Act. I think most people in this state and this nation are safety first people. They want to be protected. That is certainly the foremost, I think, thing that the government should do for us. We need to be protected. We're willing to give up a little for that. It's certainly a huge judgment call as to how much, but I don't think so far we have stepped over the line at all. There's no specific complaints or allegations of any problems with the monitoring that's been done up to this point, at least none that I've heard of. And so I can't find a single thing wrong with the programs we put in at this point. I'd like to see them continued. I'd like to see them looked at on an ongoing basis, but I'm not unhappy with what's gone on so far at all.
One of the other major issues, and one I'm sure that you have a insightful view on, is healthcare. You spent your career in the healthcare system. What's your view as one who certainly has that experience? What should we be doing in healthcare to make the quality as good as we can and yet not price people out of seeking healthcare?
Well, and I probably should have mentioned this earlier, certainly healthcare policy in this country had an impact on my decision to run for public office. I think it's critical. As I practiced medicine over the last 25 or 30 years, you saw an evolution where healthcare became less and less available and more difficult for people to understand and do, and just to really get their healthcare benefits has become challenging for so many people.